It's always a privilege to drive around here in a Formula One car, and these guys.
I'm happy.
We got one happy driver here at least. Good stuff.
You know, these kind of things can happen.
You can't say that's his Christmas present. You've got to give him something.
When battling at 200 miles an hour, it is impossible to not let your emotions get the best of you.
What the are you guys saying? Unbelievable, mate. I don't get it. What the is this about?
In fact, being a nice guy has never even been important to F1 drivers. Even the great Michael Schumacher nearly drove over fans. But in the modern era, with more and more scrutiny on drivers, being hated does have its drawbacks.
Push, I pushed.
I think I screwed Checo, sorry about that.
Shut up.
F1 drivers are split into two categories. Either you love them or you hate them. But who are the most adored and the most hated drivers on the grid? Today we look at 5 of the most loved and most despised drivers of the modern F1 era. Now your opinion might differ, but this is based on the vast majority of F1 fans.
It is going to be such fine margins. He's chasing his 9th pole of this circuit. Hamilton going for it. He's done it. He's done it at the last.
Despite being a 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton has always been one of the most respected drivers on the grid. Whilst the Brit is no stranger to his tantrums, he often doesn't come off as being direct like many others. In fact, Lewis has a massive passive-aggressive streak, which often makes people miss some of his tantrums. Who can forget when Hamilton completely disappeared from social media after losing the 2021 World Drivers' title? Fortunately, Lewis has a way with people, always appealing to fans and making as much time to be kind. This has certainly helped the former Mercedes champion earn his fair share of fans and perhaps make him one of the most adored drivers in history. Now, even though Germans are often hated, it's not the case with the next driver on our list. German drivers tend to make many enemies. In fact, Michael Schumacher is the prime example of how hated German drivers can be. This is naturally driven by their competitive nature. While Sebastian was perhaps one of the most hated on the grid during his stint at Red Bull, the now retired driver has managed to earn more fans after switching to Ferrari. His tendency to be nice to many of his competitors, often even sticking around after races to help clean up and giving a lot of his time to fans, has made the German a beloved member of the paddock. In fact, ask any F1 fan who they miss the most on the current grid, and many will tell you it's undoubtedly the Weltmeister himself. Finnish drivers have notoriously been hated on the grid. In fact, their cold demeanours and often snarky comments have been a surefire way to make them unlikable. This was seen since the day Mika Häkkinen became Formula One champion in 1998. However, one Finnish driver managed to crawl into the hearts of F1 fans. This is Kimi Räikkönen. Kimi tends to speak his mind, but he never criticises anyone. The former world champion simply just does what he has to and goes on with his life, but has remained highly competitive as well. Perhaps the F1 grid needs the humour of Kimi and his careless personality to break the tension.
Pure commitment of Kimi Räikkönen takes him up into 2nd place.
Wouldn't it be nice to have Kimi interview the drivers post-race? It could make for some excellent television. The honey badger Daniel Ricciardo has been part of the F1 grid for many years. His impressive stint at Red Bull, followed by drives at Renault and McLaren, has given the Aussie a massive fan base. His relationship with a young Lando also showed just how well he gets along with virtually anyone placed beside him. But thanks to his off-track antics and often making sure fans laugh at his stupidity, has earned him a beloved spot in the hearts of many die-hard F1 fans. With many often believing that he was screwed by some of the teams he drove for, this has only added more fuel to the fire of Daniel Ricciardo being one of the most beloved drivers on the grid. But who is the most loved F1 driver currently in the paddock?
Lando Norris going through on the brakes, or can Verstappen hang on to it? He keeps his foot in. They both go off the road.
Lando Norris is something of an enigma in the paddock. Everyone believed they had the British driver figured out. However, his demeanour quickly changed once he had the opportunity to compete for the title. Lando has always managed to bring a sense of youth to the grid, with his antics in the car, often singing songs and praising fellow drivers. This has made him an extremely likeable person. Strong followers of Norris also tell many tales of playing online games with the Brit and him having a great sense of humour. But if you were to ask many young fans who their favourite driver is, they will almost always tell you that it's Lando Norris. Despite not being the most attractive driver on the grid, his personality has also made him highly favoured by female fans. Another Brit makes it onto our list, but unfortunately he doesn't get the same treatment as his compatriot. You see, George, or Karen as many would refer to him, has a strong tendency to want to enforce the F1 laws. Russell might have some great intentions to keep the sport fair, but we all know what happened to that one kid in school who always ran to the teacher. His recent antics costing Verstappen pole at Qatar have certainly made him hated among many F1 fans. George might be an excellent driver with a great future ahead of him, but his constant whining is surely driving fans away from him. Unless he can rack up a few memorable moments or championships, he might become the next forgotten Johnny Herbert. When everything you have has been handed to you on a silver platter, it is easy to be seen as the spoilt rich kid. Unfortunately, history has never been kind to trust fund babies, especially when you consider the opinions of the public. Lance Stroll is one of the most hated drivers on the grid, with many believing that the Canadian is simply stealing a seat from a competent driver. With former F2 champion Felipe Drugovich trying to earn an F1 seat and Stroll not being competitive, many fans have said that he needs to be dropped. However, the Canadian is here to stay, and with Daddy owning the Aston Martin Formula 1 team, this doesn't seem likely to change anytime soon. If Lance Stroll doesn't get your blood boiling, perhaps the man born with the proverbial silver spoon might. Modern F1 fans might not know who Jacques Villeneuve is, but he's the son of the legendary driver Gilles Villeneuve. Much like Stroll, being part of the F1 legacy has made it possible for the Canadian to also enter the sport. In fact, he always had a somewhat competitive car, especially during his first few years in the sport. Villeneuve won his one and only Drivers' Championship in the most controversial of circumstances. It would require his main title rival Michael Schumacher to be disqualified from the championship. Perhaps Canadian drivers are simply hated by F1 fans due to their way of entering the sport. Villeneuve and Stroll had an easy ride into the pinnacle of motorsport. One of the most controversial F1 topics is that of Michael Schumacher. To many, the German is highly favoured, but his antics on and off the track bear a striking resemblance to that of Max Verstappen. In fact, Schumacher was never in the business of being nice, and the German had set out goals he wanted to achieve, regardless of anyone else. Schumacher was caught in many situations where they almost came to blows with his opponents. Most notable is the 1998 incident at Spa when Michael and David Coulthard nearly had an actual encounter in the paddock. If we disregard the history of the German, recency bias has allowed him to become a legend, and everyone now likes the man. But much like any driver performing at the top of his game, Schumacher had many haters during his prime. Perhaps handing Vettel his first ever World Championship was the cherry on the cake. The current four-time F1 champion is by far one of the most hated drivers on the grid. Born into Formula 1 royalty, Verstappen has been infuriating others since his early karting days.
It's wheel to wheel. Verstappen is ahead. Max Verstappen takes the lead.
Whilst many did get on the Verstappen bandwagon in his early days of F1, his naturally competitive streak has also led to the Dutchman racking up plenty of enemies. Thanks to the champion's bias that ensures people always hate the champion, this has elevated hatred towards the Red Bull driver. While off-track antics often determine how likeable a driver is, hardline fans are more worried about what they do on the track. But regardless of how you feel, these are the current most loved and hated drivers of the modern F1 grid. Thanks for watching, and feel free to tell us your favourite drivers in the comments section below.